Okay, hey everybody, welcome back to the Strategy Game Podcast. I'm so excited to have the founder of CHOMPS with us today. Pete, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is great. And so we have some similarities. We're both in South Florida, opposite coasts. Both went to the same university, just at different times. And so we're catching up on that a bit. But I would just love to hear about your story, Pete. So tell me about prior to starting Chomps, where your journey led you kind of throughout life.
Yeah, for sure. So I was a personal trainer in college. So I did that down at PBA for a bit. I did it up in Long Island where I grew up. And so in Long Island in particular, I was actually training clients that would live in Manhattan. They would come out to their Hampton homes on the weekends where they would meet with me. I would put them through all these different workouts and I would make these like kind of elaborate meal plans for them and grocery lists. And back then, this is probably 19 years ago, something like that, almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
I'm getting old. So, but yeah, but
You're
back
ahead
then,
of the time.
the opportunities for these like meal plans and on-the-go snacks there weren't a ton of them back then.
I think that wasn't a thing then. You were really ahead of the curve.
Yeah. So we, I started just thinking about what could I bring to market to really solve for that, make their lives a little bit easier, because none of my clients were staying on any of the meal plans that I put them on. It was too difficult for them. They were on the go all the time, running from meetings to meetings. And then they would come out and when they go out to the Hamptons, that was more of the downtime and they would actually take care of themselves. Yeah. So, and I'm sure it's just if you're not eating right, you're not going to outwork a bad diet. That's just how it works. I could put them through the greatest workouts and they're just never going to hit their goals. Yep. So, so I started coming up with different ideas. My first go at a business outside of personal training was a frozen food company. So I launched something called Frozen Fitness.
Interesting. Okay.
We were making these actual meals. And so I had a line for people that wanted to lose weight. And then I had a line for people that wanted to bulk up. It was the exact same food. It was just a bigger portion. And I was selling those out of gyms. So I wanted to get into grocery stores eventually.
Yep.
I wanted to launch the whole direct consumer thing eventually, but to start it off, I had no money. And so I wanted to go and I actually got these ice cream, like glass top ice cream freezers, and I wrapped them with my logos and I put them in gyms from South Florida. I started growing and we ended up with like 75 gyms. But then I wanted to go big and I decided I was going to raise money, and I raised money from a real estate guy down here in Naples. The absolute wrong move. It was a big learning experience for me. Within just a few months, things were getting so bad with him, and it's got kind of ugly, and we were fighting, and I'm chasing him to get cash and he's not giving it, and he's trying to control things, and it just wasn't working out. And so I ended up actually handing the company over to him, and I moved up to Chicago. I wanted to start over and start fresh. So I got into doing some like real estate and just other things. I was always entrepreneurial. Yeah. But I missed the food business and got into back, and I had this idea for Chomps, and I met my business partner up there. It was a mutual buddy.
Okay.
I told him about this idea that I had. I already kind of started working on it. And he was like, I like that idea. Do you need help? And he was an operations guy. So he was all ops consulting and finance. And I was like, I'm horrible at both of those things. So that would be amazing. I'll do the sales and marketing. You do the ops and finance. And so we both put in $3,250 a piece and hit the ground running, and started building Chomps. So yeah, we went direct to consumer first. Okay. Built a terrible website. I learned how to use Photoshop to create some packaging.
Yes.
And we started the proof of concept, and very quickly we were able to prove it out. And so that was it was kind of the transition there into Chomps.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell me about the early days of selling direct to consumer. So how did that work? Who did you target first? Did you go back to some of your old clients or contacts then? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I right before I got Chomps off the ground, I started switching over to doing more CrossFit style workouts. Yep. And paleo dieting. So I realized this CrossFit trend was just taking off like crazy. Mm-hmm. And I went out to the CrossFit Games in LA, and you just see thousands of people that are just like in the best shape you've ever seen in humans walking around. I mean, everyone just looks like they're carved out of stone. Like I've never seen some more six packs in their entire life. Yeah. But that was like, so it showed me that these people are just die hard about what they're doing. But then I walked around this vendor village, and it was like a mini trade, like a trade show for CrossFitters. And what I noticed there is that people were crazy about the CrossFit brands. Like it was like supplements, like might be protein or fish oil or whatever it was. But because it was by CrossFitters and for CrossFitters, they just had to have it. And I realized then I'm like, this is the target market. This is where I want to go, because if I could get some traction, it will really take off. So that was really how we started it. Focusing CrossFitters and paleo. It branched out from there to Whole30 and keto. And so what we did back then, it was like the early days of influencer marketing, because we had no credibility as a small brand. No one knew about CHOMPS, right? Yeah. So we just started partnering with these, might have been bloggers or nutritionists or whatever it was. And we would, and they had a following. And so that we were able to kind of leverage their following and their credibility to give us some credibility. And so they knew if people saw, if this person's recommending it, I'm going to try it. And so that was how we drove trial in the very early days. It was really just, it was one relationship after another, one community after another. It was very small, and then just kept building. And then here we are today. So
yeah. So grassroots, that reminds me of, were these the same days as the Red Bull and the Red Bull trucks, and they would show up at pop-ups and hand out, and the influencers, like that whole phase?
That was, yeah. So that was probably around that time, but we weren't doing that big though. We were
it's a little bit more grassroots.
An email blast or whatever. But at the time, like the way we would look at it, everything that we did had to have an immediate ROI, because we were bootstrapped. We were doing this with our own money. We were not going to rely on outside capital. I learned that lesson.
Yeah.
And so, it was like, we would find a community that had maybe 100,000 followers or an email list of 100,000 people. And we'd spend whatever, 5,000-6,000 to send one email blast. And we'd pray that we get 15 to 20K in return on it. And that's how it was working. And we would just continue finding those partnerships. Okay. And we got to the point where we were able to just kind of keep cycling them out.
Nice.
And so each year we would have, we would set a calendar and send out our emails or social media blasts. And again, it was grassroots. And so, but it was these niche little diet tribes. And it was, but that was how, but eventually those have all grown. I mean, you think about how big Whole30 is massive now. Keto is like, everyone does keto.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So as those communities have grown, so is our platform.
That's really cool. Okay. So do you feel like, relevant wise, you were really culturally relevant to this movement anyway of paleo, keto? Like, was all of that kind of happening and on the upswing as you guys were in the early days of CHOMPS? Do I have that timeline right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And so it was obviously trending. We created this product to check the boxes for a product that we would want to eat, or I would want to eat, right? And as a personal trainer, and I wanted to avoid sugar anyway. I was already doing those things. I was eating paleo. So I wanted to be very clean, and so I designed it around something that I would be looking for. Yeah. And it happened to check the boxes for all these different trending diets, right? It wasn't like we said, okay, I'm going to create a keto product or a Whole30 product. It wasn't like that. We just happened to check the boxes by creating a very healthy, clean product.
Yeah, that's awesome. So to walk me through the journey of the grassroots marketing, that phase, into the transition of more than just selling direct to consumer. What did that look like?
Yeah. So actually it was from a Whole30 contact. Someone was buying our product. They were doing a Whole30. They were bringing the product home, and this was someone at their house was a buyer at Coast. And so that was we actually had no retail, no national retail at the time. And that was how they heard about it. And so we had the opportunity then to pitch to Trader Joe's.
Okay.
We had the obvious conversation where they talk about, private labeling and all that. And we were actually able to convince them to give us a shot as a branded item. And so we launched that in August of 2016. Amazing. And velocities were they're extraordinary. I mean, they're crazy. Trader Joe's is an amazing partner for us. It was a crazy first partner to start with, because there was no there was no like tiptoeing into this thing. Like it goes like
They
when you're
just rolled
selling
it out everywhere, just
everywhere.
immediately.
And we had no idea how big this could actually be. Like it
Okay.
was, and
Yeah.
it is big. It's still our biggest retail customer to date. And we're in most big retailers now. And
Wow.
so, but yeah, again, they're an amazing partner. They make things very easy to work with them. You just create the product, you give them the best price that you can give,
Yes.
and they do the rest, you know? And so for us, you know, it wasn't, we didn't have to learn how to do like all the trade marketing and shopper marketing, all the things that you have to do in other stores.
Okay.
It's just make the product and deliver the product, or just have it ready for them to pick it up. Right. And then that's all you do. And then, so they do the rest. And so that for us was, it allowed us to learn the production and the QA and although that side of the business.
Yeah.
And without having to worry about all that shopper marketing and in-store marketing. So over time, we were able to learn those things as we've launched and kind of use that success to kind of springboard in other accounts and other channels.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So you kind of had an ease in there with that side of it, but not on the production side. Any crazy moments that stand out to you in terms of ramping up production that fast?
Well, yeah. I mean, so what we do, we actually hand inspect every single stick that we make.
Okay.
And so nowadays, if we're making like 7 or 8 million sticks in a month, we're actually hand inspecting every single one of those. And so we started out that way as well. And so it went from like where I would actually be in a warehouse in Chicago with 30 to 40 temporary workers that would come in, and I would create this inspection process where they would lay out the product and inspect all of them. We had a way for them to replace all the ones that were going to go like cosmetic defects or whatever it might be. And then we just kept refining that process. And so over time, we were able to get it to the point where we could scale it. And that's what we've been doing. And so, yeah, it was really interesting. One crazy story I'll tell you is actually from a financial standpoint, their initial PO was bigger than all of our revenue the year before. So that was one PO. That wasn't the whole year. It was one PO, right? So we didn't have that cash just sitting around. We were still a little business. So we ended up, it was a Friday when Rashid and I caught up on this, and we're like, listen, we needed cash like fast to do this. It was over $1 million. And we said, you know, let's go. We got to call our friends and family. There's nowhere else to do this.
Friends and family round, right?
From a Friday to a Monday, we actually were able to raise over $1 million in 3 days from, it was like, I think it was 7 different people, like friends and family. And so what we did was a debt round, and it was short-term debt, and we were able to pay them back much sooner than we were supposed to. And then it was actually interesting because even on our first week on the shelves there at Trader Joe's, we were surpassing their projections by like 5 times.
That's awesome.
And so they came back to us like immediately, like, we're going to go out of stock. We need more product immediately. So within a week of being on the shelf that this happened, so we're handing back their check and being like, here, we're paying you guys off, but we need another round of money. And every single one of them went back in. Awesome. But yeah, so it was interesting. But ever since, you know, that was the only money raising that we had to do to kind of keep the business afloat.
Okay.
Paid them back, so they're all taken care of, and that's so great. Now we've just been bootstrapped the business since.
That's awesome. It's a great position to be in, and hard to do. So that's amazing. What a cool story. Weekend turnaround time. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't sleep much during that weekend, and we didn't sleep after because it was all our friends and families, and we owed over $1 million, and we had our personal guarantees on it.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, the personal guarantee is that's nerve-wracking.
This works.
Well, I'm glad it worked, and I'm glad that Trader Joe's was your partner. I love it. We have family actually that worked for them, and they're amazing. So that's really great. So just let's talk about like just the customer journey and what their needs are and how the product has expanded, since you've originally started. Like, what are you seeing right now in the market? What's top of mind for your customers as you continue to get feedback?
Yeah. So I think obviously the obvious thing is that COVID's really just shifted everything.
Yeah.
So for one, everyone's thinking about their own health, right? I mean, everyone sees the data coming from the CDC.
Yeah.
It's about 80% of people that are ending up in the hospital or dying of COVID are overweight or obese.
Yeah.
And then if you think about the percentage of people in the US that are obese, I mean, it's like 42% or some crazy number like that. And it's like, this is bad. I mean, there's a lot of people that are scrambling right now to make sure to get that weight off and to try to stay out of the hospital. And so that's a real issue. And I feel like that's something that we're trying to do our part to really educate consumers a bit more to help them, because there's a lot of this, conflicting information about what diets are going to work for them and how they should be eating and how to lose the weight and how to keep it off. And for us, we're just really trying to put out education about making these longer term lifestyle choices, about balance. Just because we make a meat product doesn't mean we're not telling everyone to go carnivore, right? Like
Right.
We need to have healthy, balanced diets. And so that's what we want to talk about. But then aside from that, I think people are also wondering, they're at home a lot more now than, and a lot of offices aren't open up yet. So they're not on the go like they used to be. So a product like CHOMPS, we were an on the go protein snack. Yeah. Overnight, we were no longer an overnight protein snack, right?
True, right.
We had to educate consumers on other use occasions and how to use CHOMPS in other ways throughout the day. And so what we did, we started doing this prior to COVID. Luckily, we already had really good content out there, but it was just showing them how to use CHOMPS as an ingredient in other products or other meals. So it might be like in their omelets in the morning or as a salad topper for lunch.
Yes.
We have using it as a pizza topper, you name it. So we have a whole list of really great recipes on our website, which you probably wouldn't expect from a meat stick company.
No.
But yeah. So that's what we do though. And you would be surprised how many people do this. And so we, if you see all the UGC, user generated content with our customers posting this stuff on social media, and they're giving us really great ideas on how they're using CHOMPS in their own meals. So it's pretty cool to see. But what that allows you to do is to shift and position CHOMPS less of a on-the-go protein snack and more of a pantry staple. And so what we've done to kind of double down on that theory that this is what customers want is we've created these pantry packs. And so instead of only selling these single sticks on impulse at like the front end at a lot of these stores, we're creating these pantry packs where you have either 8 or 12 sticks in a bag, and they could buy the whole thing and then keep that in their pantry. So yeah, it's been a big shift.
Smart. And the pantry packs make total sense because we all eat them. My family, my kids, it's great. It's easier for them to get into, to grab out of the pantry, right? So I feel like that's great. And it's also a bigger revenue generator for you, obviously, to sell it in a pack versus the one-off. So yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. We're big fans. Anything about flavors, like different, requests or feedback, like how do you determine how wild to go? How traditional, right? How do you strike that balance in terms of new product development?
Yeah, I don't think that wild flavors are really going to be something that you're really going to see from CHOMPS for the most part. I mean, I think we have a very, one creative flavor that we have is, it's a cranberry habanero. So it's dried cranberries and so it's got this mix between a sweet and heat. That's probably the craziest flavor. It's the craziest flavor you'll see from us. But for the most part, what we're looking for is we want the fewest number of SKUs that we can make to create something for everybody, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. So we're just looking to go deep on, and we want very high volumes, we want high velocity items.
Yes.
So we want things that are gonna, work for most people. So that's really the way we think about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Has the market gotten a lot more saturated since you entered, and how have you, what have you done to combat that? That would be, I mean, that's hard,
No. So when we started this business, I mean, there were no good, sugar-free, all natural, grass-fed and finished sticks, meat sticks. There weren't. Yeah. And, but since we started though, there were a couple big exits, where a big CPG company would come and buy a small jerky company. And so what happened was, that basically it's kind of like this invitation to all the big private equity groups out there to go and start their own brands or invest in these other brands. And so you just saw this whole like slew of new brands just popping up, and year after year, we kept seeing more and more of them. It's tough because what happens is these guys will start and they kind of see what's working in the category, and then they emulate it. And then it's all the things that we were talking about originally that were, we felt like we owned and it was our brand, and, we were differentiated. You're no longer differentiated. So what are you going to do? So what we're a mission driven brand. We always have been. And so what we think about is sustainability. So how does our protein sourcing in particular, we're thinking about the environment, we're thinking about animal welfare and nutrition. And so what we've done is really putting out more and more education around those things that these other brands aren't really touching those things. And so that's what we're trying to teach our customers more and more about that stuff. The other big thing is really taste. I mean, what you'll see is from a lot of those brands is they're like, oh, keto's taking off, I'm going to create a keto jerky product, right? Yeah. And they're kind of creating it to check boxes nutritionally, and they're not worried about taste. So they're kind of reverse engineering it, and that's not the way we do it. We're just trying to create a really great tasting product with really great ingredients, and then the rest is kind of works itself out, and we check the boxes for those diets. So I feel like that's really worked out well for us, because if it's food. I mean, it doesn't matter how healthy it is, or if you're checking the boxes for nutrition, if it tastes bad, no one's going to come back and buy it. And so that's where we thrive. I mean, honestly, it's we have really strong repeat purchase rates. Customer retention is very strong on e-commerce. We have the best reviews on Amazon. And so all of that just really kind of snowballs and allows us to continue building this business.
Yeah. And I love what you said earlier too, about your background in really helping people be well and helping people be healthy. And right now, coming off of COVID or not, because it's still here, people trying to lose weight and, get healthy. And I think you guys also educating people like you're doing, sharing recipes, really expanding it into that like bigger picture mission. It really sets you apart too, because I can say I don't know of any other meat stick providers that are doing that.
Yeah, I think, obviously my background gives me a little bit of a leg up too, where I can start talking about a lot of those things and know what I'm talking about at least. So, especially, and I think a lot of the problems too is people are like, they're doing the keto diet, and then they're wondering why they can't lose weight, but then they're eating sticks of butter and, tons of nuts throughout the day, and their fat intake is through the roof, and they're not realizing that you're getting 9 calories for every gram of fat you're eating. And so their calories are through the roof. And so that's an issue. I mean, you can cut out all the carbs you want, but if you're overdoing it on fat, you're never going to lose weight. There's an energy balance. This is how science works. No one's going to convince me otherwise of that. But calories in are exceeding calories out, you're going to gain weight. And so that's a bad thing. So we want to be able to teach customers, it doesn't matter what you're eating. You should also know how much to eat. And so that's for any diet under the sun, that if you're eating too much of anything, it's never good for you. So that's what we're just trying to, it's basic dieting or nutrition information, but we want to do it in a way where it's like, keep it very understandable. Like people can actually
apply it. Yeah. Like very tangible. Yeah.
And then they also can stick with it, and so we don't want to make things very difficult and too sciencey, because people just like get turned off by that. They'll never follow it. So
yeah, that's so true. I love that. Okay. So let's shift here as we wrap up to just advice, any just knowledge that you would share with fellow founders, entrepreneurs listening to this as they go through the journey of scaling their businesses.
Oh, I have a lot. I feel like I've had a lot of failures and things that we've messed up. So I've learned a lot along the way, but I think a quick tip, I think for immediate returns on effort, it would be networking. Get really, really good at networking. Yeah. It sounds probably cliche, but man, I can tell you how many tips or tricks or contacts that I've made just from networking. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I preach that to my team. I want all of them to be out there creating their own networking groups, And and one of the big things too is if you're going to be networking with people and picking their brain and trying to get these tips and tricks, always be prepared to add value first. And you should be looking to add value on any one of these conversations, because if you're always taking and you're never returning any type of value, you're not going to get as much help as you probably hope for.
Yeah.
So I think that's a quick tip, I would say.
That's really good. And I think a lot of people just forget about it or take it for granted, but there's value in just sharing knowledge with people and building those relationships over time, because you just never know when you're going to lean on them for advice. Like I've met people a decade ago, that recently now I've pulled back in, and talked to and connected with. So you just never know. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pete. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time. And I know that everybody's going to just love this episode. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.